Debra Collin was used to long hours, aching feet, and the quiet intimacy of tending to strangers. As a home health worker, she prided herself on patience, empathy, and showing up, even when others wouldn't. She had a gift for reading people, their moods, their silences, their pain. She'd worked with elderly patients, post-surgical recoveries, and families that hovered too much or not at all. Some patients cried. Some never spoke. Some just wanted someone to notice they were still alive. Debra noticed. That was her job. Back home, things were far from quiet. Maddie, age 8, was a force of curiosity and sass, forever creating elaborate crafts and messes with equal enthusiasm. She had inherited Debra's sharp tongue and her father's stubborn streak. Tommy, 4, was chaos in motion, climbing, crashing, laughing with abandon. Their small apartment overflowed with crayons, snacks, hand-me-down toys, and mismatched socks. Nothing stayed clean for more than 5 minutes, but it was theirs. Dinner was mac and cheese that night, slightly burned, but eaten with gusto. Debra had just wrestled a fitted sheet onto the mattress when the phone rang. She wiped her hands on her jeans and grabbed it. "Miss Collin? Sorry to call after hours." It was the agency. The woman's tone was tight, businesslike. "We've got a special case. It's a private client, wealthy family, large estate outside town. The patient's young, injured recently in a horseback riding accident." Debra closed her eyes. High maintenance, she guessed. Probably some spoiled heir who thought nurses were maids. He's turned down 6 caregivers, refused treatment. The family's desperate. "I've got 2 kids," Debra said flatly, already backing out. "I understand, but they specifically asked for someone compassionate, experienced, someone like you." Debra almost said no. She didn't have time for drama. But something in the woman's voice, a flicker of urgency, of quiet plea, made her pause. "What's his name?" she asked. "Porter Kenworth." Something about the name made her stomach twist. She didn't know then that accepting would change everything. The Kenworth estate was a different world. Manicured lawns, iron gates, silence that stretched like tension. It looked like something out of a magazine. Ivy climbing old stone, windows that reflected the sky, and not a toy or handprint in sight. Debra felt the weight of it before she even stepped out of the car. Martha Kenworth greeted her at the door with a handshake, cool, practiced, polite. She was in her early 60s, with the kind of posture that came from ballet or a life of never needing to bend for anyone. Her pearl earrings didn't move when she walked. "My son, Porter," she began, gesturing for Debra to follow, "suffered spinal injuries in a horseback riding accident. He refuses therapy. He barely speaks." Debra followed Martha through the long, echoing hallways. The air smelled like lemon polish and old books, expensive, lonely. She passed closed doors, untouched furniture, and paintings of stern men and perfect horses. "He's in the West Wing. He doesn't want company," Martha added, her tone clipped, but not unkind. "But he needs help, and he needs it from someone who doesn't scare easily." Debra took in the sterile halls, the thick silence, the way even the rugs looked like they didn't welcome footprints. She thought of Maddie's construction paper art projects taped to every available wall, of Tommen's Lego landmines, of noise and life and mess. She shook her head. "I have 2 young kids. I can't do this." Martha turned to face her fully. "I understand," she said, though her eyes betrayed her. There was something strained behind her poise, like she was barely holding it together. "This was a long shot. But you came highly recommended. I had to try." For a moment, Debra just stood there, fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. The house was beautiful, yes, but it felt hollow, as if it had once been full of movement and laughter, but someone had turned the volume down and never turned it back up. She looked at Martha, saw the slight tremble in her hand, the worry carefully smoothed from her face. Debra had seen that look before, in mothers sitting beside hospital beds, in adult children trying to make sense of a parent's decline. "Thank you for your time," Martha said softly, already turning away. And that should have been it. But Debra hesitated. She wasn't sure why. Not yet. Debra spent the weekend trying to push the Kenworth estate from her mind. She took the kids to the park, cleaned the apartment top to bottom, made pancakes in shapes that didn't resemble anything but made Tommy giggle anyway. Still, the memory lingered. The silence in that house, the grief packed into the spaces between Martha's words. By Tuesday morning, the agency called again. This time, Martha herself was on the line. "I don't mean to intrude," she said calmly, "but I'd like to propose a solution." Debra rolled her eyes skyward, already bracing for another plea. "Mrs. Kenworth, I told you. I know what you told me, but I also know your time is valuable, and your children are your priority. So, I'd like to adjust the arrangement." Debra paused. "I can provide private transportation for your children to and from school," Martha continued, her tone precise. "We have a secure guest wing, tutors and after-school programs if needed. Meals, child care during your shifts, everything covered." "You want to turn your estate into a daycare?" Debra asked, skeptical. "I want Porter to have someone who won't give up after 3 days, and I want to make that possible for you." Debra didn't answer right away. She thought about Tommy's socks with holes and Maddie's latest reading slump, about how she had been stretching herself thin for months and still felt like she was failing on all fronts. "Why me?" she finally asked. There was a pause. "Because you didn't look at my son like he was broken." That landed harder than it should have. Debra sat on the edge of the couch, fingers pinching the bridge of her nose. She could hear Maddie and Tommy arguing in the background over a missing blue marker. "I'll come see the space," Debra said, "but I'm not committing yet." "Understood. I'll have the driver pick you up tomorrow morning." After she hung up, Debra stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. She hadn't said yes, but part of her already knew she would. Because something about that boy, silent, angry, hiding behind locked doors, wouldn't leave her alone. And because Martha Kenworth, despite her pearls and polish, had sounded like a mother barely keeping it together. Debra knew that feeling too well. The Kenworth driver arrived in a black SUV that looked like it had never carried a juice box or a sticky handprint in its life. Debra had tried to pack light, but with 2 kids, light meant 3 duffel bags, a box of toys, and Tommy's stuffed dinosaur named Carl. The drive was quiet. Maddie had her nose buried in a comic book. Tommy was singing softly to Carl. Debra stared out the window, watching the city thin into hills and hedgerows. The Kenworth estate was even more intimidating the second time around. This time, the gate opened like it had been waiting for them. Martha met them at the door, crisp and polite as before, but there was something softer in her eyes when she saw the children. "Welcome," she said, crouching to shake Maddie's and Tommy's hands. He stared at her solemnly and said, "You have fancy shoes." To Debra's surprise, Martha laughed. "Yes, but I never wear them in the garden." They were led through the house to the guest wing, a series of rooms larger than their entire apartment. Maddie ran straight to the window seat. Tommy opened every drawer and cabinet like it was a treasure hunt. Debra stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "This feels like too much." Martha didn't argue. "Maybe it is, but if it makes this transition easier, I'm glad to provide it." Debra didn't say thank you. Not yet. That afternoon, she met Porter. Or rather, she entered his room and spoke into the void. He lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling, expression flat. He didn't blink when she introduced herself, didn't move when she adjusted his pillows or opened the blinds. He just lay there, like a statue carved out of resentment. "Okay," Debra said finally, pulling up a chair. "You don't want me here. I get it. But I'm not leaving, so let's make it bearable." No response. She opened a book, started reading aloud. Charlotte's Web. Because Maddie insisted it was comforting. Still, nothing. That night, after the kids were asleep, and the halls went quiet, Debra stood alone outside Porter's door, staring at the wood grain. "Good night, kid," she said softly. No answer, but she could feel the listening. Days passed with little change in Porter. He didn't speak, didn't look up when Debra entered the room, didn't react when she played music softly from her phone or brought in the kids' drawings to show him. But Debra noticed things. He wasn't asleep when she read. His eyes stayed open, unfocused, but not indifferent. When Tommy dropped a juice box outside Porter's door and shouted, "Sorry, I made it sticky," Debra saw Porter's lips twitch. Barely. The house, slowly, started to shift. Martha, always composed, surprised Debra one afternoon by joining Maddie in the garden. At first, she sat stiffly on the bench while Maddie painted a flower pot. But an hour later, her hands were smeared with lavender paint and she was explaining which herbs kept deer away. Tommy became enamored with the koi pond. Martha found him naming each fish and asked to join. They began meeting daily. She brought snacks, he brought stories. Debra watched from the kitchen window, stunned. The estate, once hushed and untouchable, now echoed faintly with laughter. Not loud, not constant, but real. Porter watched from his window. Debra saw him one morning, half concealed by a curtain, following Tommy's bouncing across the lawn. When Maddie tripped and burst into tears, Debra didn't need to look back. She felt the change in Porter's posture. He flinched. Debra was sat by the window reading to Porter. And then, Eli called the kid's father. Debra answered, with cautious, "Hey, I've been going to meetings," he said, trying to get better. "I miss the kids." "Good to hear, but I don't know what you expect," she replied, exhaustion in her voice. "I don't know either," he admitted, "but I'm not giving up." Okay. That afternoon, Debra didn't bring a book into Porter's room. She sat beside him, quiet. Her thoughts were tangled. Regret, anger, fatigue. The words she wanted wouldn't come. And that's when he spoke. "I hate dads like that." Debra turned, startled. Porter's eyes were on the ceiling, but his jaw was clenched. "You're not the only one," she said. He didn't speak again. But the silence between them felt different now. Cracked open, no longer sealed shut. Debra stood up, heart racing, and whispered as she left the room, "Good talk, kid." This time, she swore, he smiled. Debra didn't rush the next day. She brought Porter breakfast and sat in silence. No music, no reading, just the quiet shuffle of eggs on a plate and Tommy shouting in the hallway. "You could have made pancakes," Porter muttered. Debra didn't look up. "You don't eat pancakes." "You didn't ask." Glanced over, hiding a smile. Noted. It became a routine. Not conversation exactly, but pieces of one. Comments about the food, complaints about the view, sarcastic jabs at Maddie's garden projects. And when she left, he didn't wait for the door to shut before asking, "Is the boy with the dinosaur coming back?" Each small moment filled Debra with something close to hope. Eli kept calling, every other evening like clockwork. Sometimes he just asked about the kids. Sometimes he talked about himself, what he was learning in counseling, how much he regretted missing their early years. Debra didn't know what to believe. Words were easy. Staying was harder. "He wants to see them," she told Porter one morning, not even realizing she'd said it aloud. "Then let him," Porter said flatly, "so they can see he's still a disappointment." Debra flinched. "That's harsh. That's honest." She stared at him. "You always this blunt?" He shrugged, one shoulder still stiff. "I've had time to practice." Later that day, the kids put on a fashion show in the backyard. Maddie made Tommy wear a towel as a cape and introduced him as king of dirt and juice. Martha watched from a lawn chair. laughing harder than Debra thought possible. Inside, Porter sat at the window. "You could be out there, you know," Debra said. "I don't want pity claps." "They're kids, Porter. They don't do pity. They do fart jokes and glitter." That got a snort. "They'd like you," she added. Porter turned from the window. "I'm not ready." "Then I'll keep showing up. Until you are." He looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if she meant it. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "Every day." That night, Debra picked up the phone when Eli called. But she didn't put the kids on. Not yet. Debra brought her guitar downstairs on a Tuesday. Tommy had been begging for a concert. And Maddie insisted they perform their latest musical masterpiece, The Great Juicebox Rebellion. It was chaotic, tuneless, and full of interpretive dance. She set up just outside Porter's room with the door open. "You're not invited," she told him, "but the music might ignore you." Porter scoffed. "I'm filing a noise complaint." "File it with Carl," Tommy yelled, brandishing his stuffed dinosaur like a gavel. Debra strummed a simple tune, and Maddie launched into a ballad about the tragic loss of the last apple juice. Porter didn't emerge, but when she peeked in mid-song, he was sitting up, eyes on the hallway, listening. Later that day, she brought flashcards for physical therapy. "We're playing a game," she announced, holding one up. "Stretch and spell." "I'm not 5, he said. "No, but Tommy is, and he plays it better than you will. So, want to be beaten by a preschooler?" It was ridiculous, and it worked. Porter reached for a band, grumbling the whole time. "This is manipulation. This is therapy disguised as fun. You're welcome." Days later, the kids made costumes for a backyard play. Porter refused to join, but after some coaxing, agreed to be the off-stage narrator. From the patio, he read the lines in a slow, theatrical voice that made Maddie collapse in giggles. By the end of the play, he wheeled himself outside. Not far. Just to the edge of the porch. Close enough. "You survived your debut," Debra said. "I should have won an award." "Next time, you wear the crown." "Next time?" he asked. That night, as Debra packed up glittery paper swords and spilled juice cups, Porter lingered nearby. "You'd make a good villain," he teased. "You think I can't play royalty? Queen of guilt trips, maybe." The banter was light, but something deeper sat under it. Ease, trust, the early flickers of something more. The kids began teasing Debra constantly about being in the next play. "You have to dress up," Maddie declared. "Like a fairy or a chicken." "I'm not being a chicken," Debra warned. Porter grinned. "I vote for fairy chicken." "Traitor," she said, but she laughed and didn't say no. It was Martha who insisted Debra take the morning off. "You've earned it," she said, setting a teacup on the table like it was a peace offering. "And he's not just their father. He's a part of your story. Whether you like it or not." Debra didn't like it, but she knew Martha was right. The park was too bright that day. Spring in full bloom, kids laughing, strollers everywhere. Eli sat on a bench near the sandbox, looking more like someone's tired older brother than the man who had once promised her forever. He stood when he saw her, hands shoved awkwardly into his jacket pockets. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I didn't say I came for you," she replied. But she sat down. There was a long silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Everything. Leaving, hiding, letting you carry it all." She didn't respond right away. Her throat was tight. "I kept thinking I'd come back when I was better," he continued. "Then 1 year turned into 4, and now Maddie barely remembers me. Tommy doesn't at all. That's not their fault." "I know," she turned to him. "You don't get to come back and play dad because you feel guilty." "I'm not here to play anything," he said quietly. "I'm here to earn whatever pieces they'll give me." Debra swallowed. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. "I'm not saying yes," she said, "but I'm not saying never." When she returned to the estate, the kids were painting rocks in the garden. Porter was in his wheelchair, spinning lazy circles in the shade. "Surprised you came back," he muttered as she approached. "Disappointed?" she asked. "Relieved." She glanced at him. He wasn't smiling, just watching her, cautiously. "I hated when my dad came around only when it was convenient for him," Porter said. "Yeah," Debra whispered. They sat quietly. "I don't want to be that guy," he said finally. "If I ever get a real chance with someone." Her heart thudded. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just let the words hang there, raw and vulnerable between them. Then, with a forced casualness, Porter added, "Also, I have a note from the kids. They cast you as the fairy chicken. Dress rehearsals tomorrow." It broke the tension like glass. "Dead to me," she said, but her smile lingered long after she walked away. Something changed after the play. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was seeing Maddie trip on her own fairy wings and get up like it was part of the act. Maybe it was the way Debra clapped, louder than anyone, even in dish gloves and a crooked tiara. But after that day, Porter started trying. Really trying. He showed up for therapy on time. He didn't complain when the exercises hurt. He asked questions. He wanted to know how the muscles worked, how long it would take to get stronger, what came next. "I want to walk again," he told his therapist without flinching. For real. Debra noticed the change too. She kept her encouragement light, sarcastic when needed, gentle when he was tired, but she could see it, the spark returning to him. One afternoon, while Maddie painted rocks and Tommy dug a hole to the other side of Earth, Porter called out to them. "Hey," he said, voice uncertain. "Want to play cards or something later?" Maddie lit up. "Only if you're ready to lose." They played in his room that evening. Go Fish, Old Maid, and a weird game Tommy made up where the loser had to wear socks on their hands. Debra peeked in once and saw all three of them laughing, socks on their ears, faces red with giggles. "You weird," Porter told Tommy. "You're welcome," Tommy replied proudly. The next day, Maddie brought a notebook and sat beside Porter on the porch. "We should write a new story together," she said. "One with adventure and robots." Porter shrugged. "Okay, but no glitter. Glitter's evil." Debra watched from the window and said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt when something real was forming. That night, when she brought Porter his evening meds, he looked up and said, "I like them. I didn't think I would." She sat down next to his bed. "Me neither, honestly." Porter fiddled with the corner of his blanket. "Do you think I'll be able to walk before school starts?" "I think," she said, "if you keep working the way you are, you'll surprise yourself." He nodded, eyes hopeful. "I want to run again." "You will," she said. "And when you do, we're racing." "You'll lose." "Probably," Debra smiled, "but I'll still show up." And for the first time in a long while, Porter believed her. Eli called again that weekend, his voice steadier, but still cautious, like someone walking through a house with creaky floorboards. "Hi," he said. "I sent Maddie a book, something about space and strong girls. Thought she'd like it." "She did," Debra admitted. "She stayed up reading it with a flashlight." There was a pause on the line, the kind that used to mean nothing, but now felt heavy with meaning. Maddie didn't want to call. She don't know what to say. "She's still figuring it out," Debra said. "She remembers the letdowns, the waiting at the window. I hate that I gave her those memories." "You did, and now you're trying to undo it." Another pause. "I want to see them. Just to visit. I don't expect anything else." Debra sat on the edge of her bed, heart torn in half. Part of her wanted to shut the door for good. The other part, the part that still believed in second chances, even when they scared her. "I'll think about it," she said. After she hung up, she didn't say anything to the kids. Not yet. That afternoon, she found Porter in the sunroom, stretching his legs with careful precision. He didn't look up when she entered, but he could tell something was off. "Bad call?" he asked. Debra hesitated, then sat beside him. "Eli wants to see Maddie and Tommy. He says he's trying." Porter didn't speak right away. Then he said, "Trying doesn't erase leaving." "No, it doesn't. But it's still something," he added after a long beat. "It's more than most." Debra looked at him. "You've been listening to too many grown-up conversations. I live in this house," he said dryly. "Not much else to listen to." She laughed, then grew quiet. "I don't want to hurt them by letting him close. But I don't want to hurt them by keeping him away either." Porter's voice softened. "Then maybe let them decide. Kids aren't as breakable as adults think." Debra leaned back against the couch, surprised at how much she needed to hear that. From him, of all people. That night, she sat with Maddie and Tommy, and for the first time in years, said, "Would you want to see your dad? Just once, to talk?" Maddie blinked. Tommy asked if he'd bring toys. And Debra realized maybe, just maybe, the door didn't have to stay shut forever. They met at the small neighborhood park near the old apartment. Debra had chosen it carefully, somewhere familiar, public, but not too busy. She didn't tell the kids until that morning, wanting to give them room to react honestly. Maddie froze when she heard the name. Tommy, younger, just asked, "What's he look like again?" Debra packed snacks and wipes and braced herself for anything. Eli was already there when they arrived, sitting on the same bench that he used to swing Maddie from. He stood quickly, trying not to look nervous, but failing completely. He looked older than Debra remembered, less reckless, like someone who'd been through something and finally stayed put long enough to face it. Maddie didn't run. She didn't even walk ahead. She clung to Debra's side until they were just a few feet away. Tommy looked up at her, unsure. Eli crouched to his level. "Hey bud," he said gently. "I'm your dad." Tommy blinked. "You don't have a beard." Eli smiled. "I used to. I lost it, like socks in the dryer." Tommy looked at Debra for confirmation, then shrugged and sat in the grass. Eli let out a slow breath and stood to face Maddie. "Hi," he said. Maddie stared at him. She didn't speak. "I'm not expecting anything," he said softly. "You don't have to talk to me or hug me. I just wanted to be here if you wanted to see me." She looked him up and down, arms crossed. "Why now?" "Because I wasn't ready before," he said honestly. "And that's not an excuse, it's just the truth." She looked down at her shoes, silent. Then finally, "I read the book you sent." "You did?" She nodded. "It was okay." "That's fair." They sat in awkward quiet for a moment. Then Tommy blurted, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Eli blinked. "The best. Even the smelly ones?" "Especially the smelly ones." That broke the tension. Tommy launched into an explanation of his Stinkosaurus, and Eli listened like it was gospel. Maddie didn't join in, but she didn't leave either. And when Eli offered them juice boxes he'd packed himself, she took one. Debra stayed back, watching from the edge of the grass, arms folded, heart open but cautious. Eli looked over once, met her eyes. He didn't smile. He nodded. It was just a start, but it was real. Porter had been working hard, quietly, fiercely. He never boasted, never asked for praise. But Debra saw it in the small things. The way he gritted his teeth and pushed through a painful stretch. How he started setting his alarm himself. How he no longer needed reminders to get to his sessions. "I think we're getting close," his physical therapist whispered one morning, just loud enough for Debra to hear. "He's ready to try the parallel bars again." Porter had tried them once, weeks ago. The result had been shaky, frustrating, and full of tears he refused to show. After that, he'd avoided them completely. But something was different now. That afternoon, Debra found him staring at the empty bars in the rehab room. "You thinking about trying again?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "If I fall, I don't want anyone to laugh." "No one's laughing," she said. "We're too busy cheering." The next day, Maddie and Tommy made signs with glitter and markers. "Go Porter," and "You can do it, maybe," hung crooked on the rehab room wall. Martha arrived quietly and sat in the corner. pretending to check her emails but never taking her eyes off her son. Porter looked terrified, but he stood. Gripping the bars, he planted both feet. He wobbled. His arms shook, but then, step. One foot forward. Pause. Then the other. A second step. Everyone held their breath. He let go with one hand, just for a second, just to prove he could. When he reached the end of the bars, he turned around and looked at Debra. She was crying and clapping at the same time, and Maddie screamed, "You're basically a ninja now." Even Tommy gasped. "You walked." Porter didn't say anything right away, just wiped sweat from his brow. Flushed and breathing hard. "I told you I wasn't done," he whispered. "You're just getting started," Debra said, kneeling beside him. Later, as they wheeled him back to his room, he whispered to her, "Do you think one day I'll be able to run?" Debra didn't hesitate. "I don't think. I know." That night, they celebrated with ice cream, music, and one of Maddie's famous victory dances. And as Porter sat surrounded by laughter and love, he realized something that scared and thrilled him at once. He felt like part of something again. Porter had been working hard, quietly, fiercely. He never boasted, never asked for praise. But Debra saw it in the small things, the way he gritted his teeth and pushed through a painful stretch. How he started setting his alarm himself, how he no longer needed reminders to get to his sessions. "I think we're getting close," his physical therapist whispered one morning, just loud enough for Debra to hear. He's ready to try the parallel bars again. Porter had tried them once, weeks ago. The result had been shaky, frustrating, and full of tears he refused to show. After that, he'd avoided them completely. But something was different now. That afternoon, Debra found him staring at the empty bars in the rehab room. "You thinking about trying again?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "If I fall, I don't want anyone to laugh." "No one's laughing," she said. "We're too busy cheering." The next day, Maddie and Tommy made signs with glitter and markers. "Go Porter," and "You can do it, maybe," hung crooked on the rehab room wall. Martha arrived quietly and sat in the corner, pretending to check her emails but never taking her eyes off her son. Porter looked terrified, but he stood. Gripping the bars, he planted both feet. He wobbled, his arms shook, but then, step. One foot forward, pause, then the other. A second step. Everyone held their breath. He let go with one hand, just for a second, just to prove he could. When he reached the end of the bars, he turned around and looked at Debra. She was crying and clapping at the same time, and Maddie screamed, "You're basically a ninja now." Even Tommy gasped. "You walked?" Porter didn't say anything right away, just wiped sweat from his brow, flushed and breathing hard. "I told you I wasn't done," he whispered. "You're just getting started," Debra said, kneeling beside him. Later, as they wheeled him back to his room, he whispered to her, "Do you think one day I'll be able to run?" Debra didn't hesitate. "I don't think. I know." That night they celebrated with ice cream, music, and one of Maddie's famous victory dances. And as Porter sat surrounded by laughter and love, he realized something that scared and thrilled him at once. He felt like part of something again. The calendar didn't lie. Debra's stay was almost over. The plan had always been temporary, just until Porter stabilized, just until the school year ended. Now summer was creeping in, and with it came decisions. She started packing a little at a time, a suitcase under the bed, toys sorted into bins, clothes refolded and stacked. The house felt it. Maddie grew quieter, clinging to Martha in the afternoons, sketching pictures of the garden she swore she'd forget. Tommy kept asking questions. Do rich people get mail? Do koi fish get sad? Will Porter come over for pancakes? Porter tried not to let it show, but he was watching too. You're really leaving? He asked one evening, staring at his reflection in the hallway mirror. I have to, Debra said gently. My job's done. Doesn't feel done. Debra smiled. Maybe that's the good kind of unfinished. Later that night, he called his mom into his room. I want to do something before they go. What kind of something? A surprise. Martha, who rarely approved of anything unplanned, surprised him by saying, "Tell me what you need." Over the next few days, they whispered in corners. Martha made phone calls. The housekeeper smuggled in string lights. The gardener trimmed the hedges with suspicious enthusiasm. The kids were kept out of the loop, which annoyed Maddie immensely and excited Tommy beyond reason. Debra noticed something was up. She caught glimpses. Martha tucking a grocery list into her pocket quickly. Porter giving the nurse a shh signal. Tommy blurting, "I know a secret," then running away before he spilled it. She didn't press. Part of her didn't want to ruin whatever it was. On their last official night, Martha asked if they could all have dinner outside. "The weather's perfect," she said, "and the garden's been begging to be noticed." Debra agreed. She didn't expect the string lights. The long table set with cloth napkins. The tray of sparkling apple cider. She didn't expect Porter, standing, one hand gripping the back of a chair, waiting for her with a smile. "You said if I walked, we'd dance," he said. "You still up for that?" Debra covered her mouth with her hands. She nodded. Music played from a speaker tucked behind the roses. Maddie gasped. Tommy clapped. Martha smiled with quiet pride. They danced, slowly, unsteadily, surrounded by twinkling lights and the people who made it all matter. No one said goodbye that night. Just, "See you again." The next morning, the garden looked almost the same. String lights still swaying, plates forgotten on the table, footprints in the grass. But inside, something had shifted. Porter didn't come to breakfast. He skipped his morning stretch. When Debra peeked in, he was lying in bed, the same book from yesterday, unopened on his lap. "You feeling okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was dull. His shoulders were stiff. "You sure?" "I just don't feel like doing anything today." Debra sat on the edge of his bed, watching him. The progress he'd made, the laughter, the courage, none of it was gone, but right now, it was buried under something heavier. Something familiar. "You're allowed to have bad days," she said, "but you're not allowed to lie to me about them." Porter stared at the ceiling. "You're leaving." "It's fine. I just thought it wouldn't suck this much." Her heart cracked. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Want me to stay a little longer?" He didn't answer, but he didn't let go. Later that afternoon, Martha found Debra in the kitchen, folding a stray sweater that somehow ended up on the counter. She looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from thinking too much. "Can we talk?" Martha asked. Debra nodded. They sat at the sunlit table, the same place where so many unspoken things had lived. "I've watched you with him," Martha said quietly. "With Porter, with the children. You didn't just help him recover. You helped him hope again." Debra didn't speak. "I know you were meant to go back. I know this wasn't permanent. But I was wondering, would you consider staying on?" As Porter's full-time home caregiver, Debra blinked. "You mean like, live here again?" "Whatever arrangement works best. I can provide schooling for Maddie and Tommy. Keep the structure we had. I would give you space. Autonomy and support." Debra leaned back in her chair, stunned. "Martha, I don't know. I'm not asking you to decide now, but I had to ask." For him, there was a long silence between them. "I thought this was temporary," Debra said softly. "So did I," Martha replied. "But some things, some people, come into our lives, and they're not meant to be temporary." In the hallway, Porter was listening. He didn't smile, but for the first time that day, he sat up. Debra stood in the guest room that evening, staring at two open suitcases, one half-packed, one untouched. She hadn't told the kids yet, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't want to sway them. This decision couldn't be hers alone. After dinner, she called them into the sunroom. "Okay," she said. "We need to talk." Maddie flopped onto the couch dramatically. "Are we moving again?" "Sort of. Martha asked if we want to stay. She wants me to work with Porter full-time. Like before, but longer." Tommy looked up from his toy truck. "So no more apartment?" "Maybe not," Debra said carefully. "It would mean new schools, different routines, a lot of change. But we'd still be together." Maddie crossed her arms. "Is this about Porter?" "It's about all of us," Debra said. "But yeah, he matters. You all do." Tommy looked at his sister. "I like it here. They have fish and muffins." Maddie rolled her eyes. "You like anywhere with muffins." But he didn't argue. After a long pause, she said, "I'll stay, but only if I get to decorate my new room." Debra smiled. "Deal." The next morning, the estate had a new visitor. Martha greeted her brother Ivan at the door with a hug that said, "I love you," and a glare that said, "Be nice." He was tall and formal, dressed like he was on his way to a board meeting instead of visiting family. "I had to see this for myself," he said. "Porter walking after everything?" "He's made incredible progress," Martha said, "and it's largely because of Debra." Ivan arched a brow. "The caregiver? The one you let move in?" "I let a mother move in, with her children, and I don't regret it." Debra met him in the hallway. He offered a hand, firm and unreadable. "You've certainly stirred the quiet around here," he said. "I guess that's one way to put it," she replied. He looked over her shoulder, where Porter stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, waiting. He didn't want to see anyone for months. Didn't speak. Barely moved. "He's still figuring things out," Debra said, "but he's not hiding anymore." Ivan watched as Porter slowly made his way down the hall, one step at a time. No wheelchair in sight. "Well," Ivan muttered, "I'll be damned." Later that day, Ivan sat quietly in the garden, watching the kids paint rocks and Porter argue with Tommy about what color dinosaurs really were. "You were right," he told Martha. "This wasn't just recovery. This was rescue." Debra waited until breakfast was over, after the cereal spills and juice box negotiations, to find Martha in the library. "I've decided," she said, hands tucked in her back pockets. "We'll stay. I'll take the position." Martha looked up from her notes. "You sure?" "I'm sure, but I'd like to keep the kids in the rhythm they've built here. School, aftercare, time with you in the garden. It works. I won't let work erase their life." Martha's lips twitched into a smile. "Then we have an agreement." They shook hands, though the gesture felt more like sealing a quiet promise than a deal. That same morning, Eli arrived for another visit. He was early, nervous, holding a brown paper bag of snacks and a soccer ball under one arm. "You're not late," Debra said. "Don't overthink it." Maddie met him in the hallway, arms crossed. "You brought snacks?" "Healthy ones," I Googled. "Smart move," she said, grabbing the bag and walking toward the backyard. Tommy barreled into Eli with a hug that nearly knocked him backward. "Can we play dinosaurs and then soccer?" Eli grinned. "Only if I get to be the Stinkosaurus this time." As the three of them headed out, Debra watched from the porch, equal parts proud and guarded. Ivan appeared beside her, sipping coffee in a real cup, not a travel mug. "You look like someone who hasn't sat down in a week," he said. "I've had worse weeks." "Come on," he said. "Coffee break. My treat or Martha's pantry." They sat on the back patio, just far enough to watch the kids play without being obvious. Ivan leaned back in his chair. "You've built something here." "I didn't plan to. Some of the best structures weren't. But now that it's built, are you ready for the foundation to shift?" Debra frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean Eli," he said. "He's not who he was, but neither are you, and the kids are watching all of it." "I know." "Then you're already doing better than most." They sipped in silence for a while. Eli chased Tommy in the grass, while Maddie barked orders like a general commanding her troops. "They're starting to trust him," Debra said quietly. "Are you?" Ivan asked. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't say no. A week after the decision to stay, life inside the Kenworth estate found its own kind of rhythm. Porter had morning therapy, followed by schoolwork. The kids returned to a summer learning program Martha had arranged, complete with garden journaling and art afternoons. Debra moved through her days with a new kind of purpose. Less as a guest, more like someone claiming space she'd earned. But change always leaves shadows. One evening, as the house settled into quiet, Debra found Porter in the hallway outside his room, one hand pressed to the wall, his brow furrowed. "You okay?" she asked. "Trying not to overthink one bad step," he muttered. She helped him sit, and they stayed there, legs stretched out on the cool wood floor. "I'm scared," he said, "of getting better. Because what if it doesn't last? What if I get used to walking and lose it again?" Debra didn't rush to comfort him. She let the silence stretch. "That's not weakness," she finally said. "That's honesty. Being scared means you understand what you're fighting for." Porter nodded, eyes glassy. "It's like, if I keep trying and fall, I'll disappoint everyone again. Then fall in front of people who will catch you. That's the difference." He leaned against her shoulder. "Just for a minute. Just enough." Later that night, Debra stepped out to the garden for air. The sky was deep blue, stars poking through clouds, and the string lights from the surprise dinner still hung along the path. Ivan was there, often now. He handed her a cup of tea without a word, then pointed to the bench. "You never stop," he said. "You sit down for 5 minutes and still manage to hold the whole house together." "I don't hold it together," she said. "I just try not to drop anything important." He smiled slightly. "You ever think about what's important just for you?" Debra hesitated. "I used to. Then I had kids. Then I had bills. And now?" She didn't answer. Ivan looked at her carefully, not the assessing way of someone judging, but the soft look of someone who's quietly impressed. "You're good at seeing other people," he said. "But has anyone asked if you're okay?" Debra blinked, caught off guard by the question, and by how much it hit. He didn't press. He just sat beside her, watching as the night grew darker, calm, and still. And she didn't get up. Not for a long time. The days moved fast now. Between Porter's rehab sessions, lesson planning for the kids, and coordinating meals, Debra barely had time to breathe. But somehow, it was easier than it used to be. Lighter. The house was full of movement. Martha, working in the garden with Tommy. Maddie, organizing her own nature club. Porter, walking the halls more steadily, is still with care. And Ivan. He lingered longer each day. He claimed he was staying to observe the miracle in motion, but he started asking Debra if she wanted coffee. Brought her books she'd once mentioned in passing. Sat beside her at dinner instead of across the table. He never pushed, just offered quiet presence, calm conversation, space she didn't have to fill. One afternoon, after Porter's therapy session, Ivan met her in the hallway with 2 lemon waters and said, "You need a break." "I have 10 things to finish." "Exactly," he said. "Take 10 minutes. Pretend you're a guest, just for once." They sat on the steps of the side porch, feet propped on the railing. Ivan leaned back, hands folded behind his head. "You ever get tired of carrying everyone?" he asked. Debra sipped her drink. "Not really. I get tired of pretending I'm not." He smiled. "That sounds like someone who needs someone to lean on once in a while." She didn't respond, but the silence between them felt easy. Later that evening, Porter sat on the edge of his bed, sneakers tied, palms sweating. "I'm scared," he said. Debra crouched beside him. "That's normal. They want me to walk from the therapy room to the garden, with no one near me, just me." "You're not alone. You're just stepping out." "I fall, it's public. You walk, it's powerful. He exhaled, jaw clenched. Will you be there? Every step, she promised. He looked at her. And will he be there? His eyes flicked toward the garden, where Ivan was talking with Martha under the pergola. Debra smiled softly. If you want him to be. Porter nodded. He's okay. For a grown-up. The next day would be Porter's biggest challenge yet, and everyone would be there to watch. But tonight, under soft lights and quiet stars, Debra sat on the steps again, with Ivan beside her, not asking for anything, just being there. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself enjoy being seen. The morning was warm and still, the kind of summer air that holds its breath. Porter stood in the hallway outside the therapy room, eyes locked on the far end of the garden path, where a wooden bench waited beneath the pergola. The distance wasn't far for most, but for Porter, it may as well have been a mountain. Debra crouched to double-check the fit of his shoes. You okay? He nodded, but his hands trembled slightly. If I fall, do not help me. Let me do it. Debra hesitated, then said, You've already done the hard part. This is just proof. Martha stood near the glass doors, holding Tommy's hand. Maddie had a sign that read, Go, P, in bubble letters. Even Eli had come by, unsure if he was welcome, but came anyway. And Ivan? Ivan stood just a few steps behind Debra, arms folded, face unreadable. But his eyes never left Porter. The door opened, the path cleared. Porter stepped out onto the patio. The first few steps were slow, controlled. His braces clicked softly with each movement. He didn't look up at the bench. He kept his eyes on the path, on the rhythm, on breathing. 10 feet. 15. Debra held back, resisting every instinct to hover. She was there if he fell, but he didn't. 20 feet. He staggered once, paused, looked at her. You've got it, she said, voice calm. Keep going. 30 feet. Tommy started clapping. Maddie yelled, Go, 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 and then Porter reached the bench. He didn't collapse onto it. He sat down, slowly, carefully, and raised both hands in the air, like a tiny champion. Everyone cheered. Martha covered her mouth, eyes brimming. Eli let out a whistle. Maddie launched into a cartwheel that ended in a thud. Debra walked over last. Proud of you, she said. Porter looked up at her. I'm proud of me too. She hugged him tight. He didn't pull away. As the others gathered to celebrate, Debra stepped back, heart full and aching in the best way. Ivan appeared beside her, handing her a napkin. For your eyes. I'm fine, she muttered, wiping a tear. You're allowed to feel things, Debra. She turned to him. They didn't say more. They just stood there, side by side, watching a boy who believed in himself again, and quietly realizing they'd become part of something bigger than any of them expected. It was after dinner, after the dishes had been stacked. The kids had scattered to board games and bedtime books, and Porter had settled into the beanbag chair in the sunroom with a comic Maddie insisted he read. Debra stepped out onto the back patio, stretching her legs and stealing a few minutes of quiet. Ivan was already out there, sipping coffee in the dark. You always find the still spots, he said, not looking at her. Only place I can hear myself think. That he nodded, tapping the rim of his mug. You've been thinking a lot lately. I'm always thinking. I know. A beat passed, then he added. That's one of the things I like about you. Debra turned her head slightly. The words were gentle, but firm. No dancing around. Ivan set his cup down, stood and looked at her, with the calm kind of confidence only a man who'd stopped pretending knew how to carry. I've been watching you. Not just the way you take care of everyone, but how you move through it all. Thoughtful, steady, stronger than most people I've met. Ivan, wait. I'm not in a rush, he said. But I'm not going to act like I'm not interested. Debra let out a slow breath, folding her arms. You don't make things easy. Wasn't trying to. I just don't want to leave here wondering if I said nothing about something that matters. She looked away, eyes fixed on the dark outline of the garden. "I have 2 kids," she said. "I've got a history with Eli that's not all cleaned up yet. I've made more hard choices in 5 years than most people do in a lifetime. I don't get to leap." "I'm not asking you to leap," he said quietly. "Just take a step if you want to. Or stay still. I'll match your pace." She turned back to him slowly. "Why now?" "Because it's real, and I'd regret not being clear." Debra felt the weight of everything she'd carried. Her children, her failures, her guardedness, and for once didn't feel the need to armor up. "I'm not ready," she said, "but I'm not closed." Ivan nodded. "That's enough." He didn't try to touch her, didn't press, just smiled, and sat down on the bench, giving her space to sit beside him or walk away. She stayed. Not close, not far, but there. And for now, that was everything she had to give. Eli showed up on a Saturday afternoon with juice boxes and sidewalk chalk. Tommy greeted him like a tornado, already pulling him toward the driveway to start a masterpiece. Maddie, a little more cautious, gave a tight nod and joined them with a clipboard and ideas. "No rainbows," she said. "We're doing a city today." Eli took direction without flinching. He was learning. Debra watched from the porch for a while before stepping out. "Got a minute?" she asked. Eli dusted his hands and followed her to the edge of the yard. She stood with her back to the house, arms crossed, but steady. "I've been thinking," she said. "That usually means something serious," he replied, half smiling. "It is." He folded his arms, bracing himself. "I'm ready to date again," she said. Eli blinked. "Oh. I'm telling you because I don't want it to be a surprise later. I'm not asking your opinion, just giving you respect." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Is it someone I know?" "It's no one's business yet," she said, calm but firm. "And it's not about that. This is about me. I've spent years putting everything else first. My job, my kids, my survival. Now I'm carving out something for me." He looked down at the grass. "Fair." Debra took a breath. "You'll always have the chance to be in their lives, if you keep showing up like this. But we're not a family in the way we were. That chapter's done." Eli nodded, slower this time. "I get that. I do. I need consistency from you. Not half effort. Not emotional boomerangs. Just the work." "I'm doing it," he said, "even when it's hard." "I know." She looked at him, really looked, and saw someone trying, even if he was late. "Keep doing it, for them." Eli glanced over to where Maddie was drawing a skyscraper with a purple outline. Tommy was attempting to draw a monster truck the size of a building. "I missed so much," he said softly. "And you won't get it all back, but you still get something if you earn it." He looked at her again, more grateful than wounded now. "Thank you for not shutting me out. You gave me plenty of reasons," she said. "But the kids deserve a dad who doesn't quit." Debra turned to go, then paused. "And Eli?" "Yeah. I'm not your second chance." She walked back to the house without looking back, and for the first time, she felt free. The house had quieted again. Tommy was asleep. One arm flopped dramatically off the bed, like he'd passed out mid-battle with a pillow monster. Maddie was in the library with Martha, sorting through a stack of books she insisted she'd finish by the end of the month. Porter had just finished his stretches, his walk around the hallways, now part of his evening routine. He gave Debra a tired high five and disappeared into his room with a comic book. And Debra, for once, wasn't rushing to clean up or prep lunch for the next day. She was looking for Ivan. She found him outside by the back fence, checking on one of the new trellises Martha had added to the garden. The moonlight cast long, silver-blue shadows, and the air smelled like thyme and wet soil. "Fixing things again?" she asked. "Loosening screws and pretending I know what I'm doing." She smiled. "You're convincing." He straightened up, brushing his hands on his jeans. "What's up?" She didn't circle around it. She'd spent enough of her life waiting for the perfect moment. This was it. "I've been thinking," she began. He tilted his head. "You and your thinking again." "I know," she exhaled, "but this time it's good. I'd like to go out. With you. Dinner. A date." Ivan's expression didn't change at first. Just a slow blink, as if he was checking whether he heard her right. "You're asking me out?" "Yes." She lifted her chin. "Is that a problem?" "Not even a little." His face broke into the kind of smile that was equal parts surprise and something softer. "I'd love to." "Good. But it's just dinner," she added. "No grand gestures, no fast-moving trains. I have 2 kids, one very sarcastic teenage patient, and a history that still breathes down my neck sometimes." "Then we'll start with dinner," Ivan said. "And if that goes well, maybe breakfast one day." She smirked. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me with dinner." "I'm learning," Debra replied. "Takes time." And there, in the moonlit garden where so much had started to change, she took a new kind of step. This time, for herself, summer slipped into fall before anyone noticed. The garden changed first. Bright colors fading into deeper greens and rusts, the flowers giving way to tall grasses and the last blooms of the season. The mornings came cooler, the air crisp with something that smelled like wood smoke and new beginnings. Porter walked on his own now, not just short distances, full laps around the estate, up the path to the stables, across the garden to where Martha sat with her tea, pretending not to cry every time he came around the corner without a brace. "I'm faster than Maddie now," he liked to announce, despite the fact that Maddie usually let him win. He had strength in his stride and purpose in his eyes. The quiet, angry boy Debra first met was still there, but softened. "Phew." He smiled more. He laughed without catching himself. He played board games and lost on purpose just to see Tommy gloat. Martha had never looked more content. Debra's life had settled too, though in a way she never expected. The guest wing was still theirs, but it no longer felt temporary. The kids had their rooms, their routines. Porter had become like a big brother, and Ivan was still slow-moving, still thoughtful. But they were a them now. Not because of some grand moment, but because of the 1,000 small ones. Late-night conversations on the porch, a hand on her back when she was overwhelmed. The way he helped Tommy with science homework without making a show of it. He never tried to replace anyone. He just stayed. One Saturday, Eli came by to take the kids to the park. He brought a kite and snacks and forgot sunscreen again. Maddie greeted him with a hug. Tommy ran up yelling, "Dad," and tugged at his sleeve before he could even put the bag down. Debra watched it from the kitchen window. She didn't flinch anymore when they called him Dad. He'd earned it, not through apology, but through presence. He still had a long way to go, but he kept showing up. Later that evening, Debra and Ivan sat together on the back steps, watching Porter toss a football with Tommy, while Maddie shouted plays like a tiny coach. Ivan nudged her shoulder. "So, when are we going to make this official?" She looked at him. "You mean it's not?" "Just thought I'd hear you say it." She leaned her head against his. "It's official." The sun dipped behind the trees. The yard was full of laughter and new roots, not perfect, but whole. And for the first time in years, Debra didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was home. The end. Hope you enjoyed the love story by Green Tea Tales.